Luenell, welcome back.
Hey, Vlad, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just saw you at the Snoop Dogg roast recently.
Yeah, that was super fun. I remember all the roasts, the Dean Martin ones and the Richard Pryor roasts and stuff, but they've gotten so like mean and personal and vicious lately. I've never been one to want to do one, but for Snoop, I would do it. And I definitely don't think I did one of my best jobs there because I was like on the cards and they wanted me to say certain things and I wrote some stuff and they wrote some stuff and then I got there and looked like all the guys were just kind of free falling. So I wish I'd have done that, but it's in the can now.
So, like, how does that work? Like, when you see these roasts on television, is like, is most of the stuff written for the comedians? Do the comedians mix and match? Do the comedians write their own stuff? Like, how does it usually work? Because I don't know.
Well, I've never done one before except for to do the roast battle at the Montreal Comedy Festival in Canada. And I didn't want to do that. So I think that if you're a real comedian, that is probably a little bit of both. They have writers that write things for you and comedians that tell them that that sucks and then they write their own. And then there's the kind that have stuff written and they go up there and they don't do any of that. So, I think it depends on the comic, really, and the person being roasted.
Right, because I have a feeling like Mike Epps didn't read a lot of his script.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, it seemed like he was freestyling most of it.
French Montana, too, right?
Yeah, that was interesting. Like French Montana doing comedy was I don't know. It didn't. I don't know if it worked or not.
Well, they have a lot of people who weren't comedians who've done comedy because right before the roast, I rewatched the Richard Pryor roast with John Witherspoon and Marsha Warfield, and they had um, Tim Reed on there. He's not a comedian, and they had a couple of other people who weren't necessarily comics, they were actors. So they've had people roast people before that weren't comedians, but they usually have something funny they like to say about the roastee, so that's why I guess.
Right, because I remember was it Martha Stewart roasted Justin Bieber, and she's definitely not a comedian, but
Absolutely not.
she kind of pulled that off though.
Well, I think she has a some kind of a dry wit. It seems to work on the new show that her and Snoop are doing now, the potluck, Snoop and Martha's potluck dinner show. She gets a few in there. I think pretty much everybody's got a little one day, they might have a good day and get a couple off, but no, she's not a comedian at all. But I just for all the shit that I talk, I can dish it out, but I don't like to take it. And I really just, even in my comedy, I don't talk about people per se. Some people who are, public and, you know, fair fodder for comedy, I'll talk about, but not really personal stuff.
You know who really killed it? I think
I
in
know
that
who killed it.
Was that
I know who killed it.
who killed it? Who do you think killed it?
Tony Hinchcliffe murdered it.
There you go. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
It's obvious. Everybody who sees it will see that, and I already knew. See, I don't think those guys knew who Tony was, but I met Tony in Montreal at the roast battle, and I knew what he was gonna do. And he sat back there, very nondescript, and he came up there, and I fell. If you remember, I fell out of my seat onto the floor.
I do remember that.
Yeah, I think
I do.
I think
I do.
people saw my panties. I'm not sure.
Like I didn't even know who he was. Like I hadn't even heard of his name. And like so this random white kid comes up, to the podium and just proceeds to murder it.
Yeah, he's a writer, and he's been writing for a long time, and he's just a beast. I knew. I already knew. I was expecting big things out of him, as I had to go up against him in Canada, and I was like, okay, you win, whatever. But yeah, he killed that thing, and I think that's probably going to go viral whenever it hits.
Yeah, I mean we're actually bringing him in for an interview.
Oh, are you?
Yeah,
Well, you be sure to tell him what I said.
I will.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of people who aren't comedians who do comedy, there's the whole thing with NeNe Leakes that just happened not too long ago.
No, that happened a long time ago now.
Well, I mean, what? This year, though.
Yeah.
earlier in the year. So let's just kind of recap what happened for people who may not know the story.
I really didn't think it was going to be this big of a deal when I did my rant, but all it was it seems to me that everybody seems to think they're a comedian. They don't even say, I'm trying to be a comedian, or I'm an aspiring comedian, or I have a desire to be a comedian. It's like, I'm a comedian. I can do what you do. Damn that you've been doing this 20 years. I'm so-and-so, and I'm a comedian, and I can go out and get your money. And when I was working in some clubs, I was looking up and seeing her face next to my face in a lot of clubs. And I'm like, well, what is this? Is she a comedian now? So for somebody who's made a living off of being really mean and snotty and bullying people on reality television, who, I had met casually before, I just found it insulting that this person could come into my house and take money from comics who are legitimate, bona fide comedians. If she wanted to attempt to do stand-up, fine. Wendy and many other people have attempted to do that, and they found that it was much harder than it looks. Wendy did it. She did it in theaters. She never did it in comedy clubs or anything like that. She did it, she got her money, and she left it alone. It was basically just a gathering for her and her friends to come and talk shit and have fun. But NeNe was in comedy clubs and then roasted me for what I said on Instagram by saying, I never said I was a comedian, be clear. And, why don't you give me a call? Maybe I'll let you open up for me one day. Well, that was disrespectful. And it was clear that you are definitely trying to be a comedian if you're doing all your shows in comedy clubs. If I wanted to be on reality TV, NeNe Leakes don't have nothing to say about that. If I wanted to be on Real Housewives, she got something to say about that. That's her home. That's her brand. That's her thing. If she didn't want me on there, or if I wanted to be on there and wasn't a housewife, she could have something to say about that. That's all I was saying. I don't care what she does, but I think that she has found out through the recent cancellations that I've seen on the internet, I think she has found out that it is more than it's cracked up to be, and it really is an art form. It looks like it's just standing on stage talking trash, but it really is not that, at least not for me.
Well, I found the most interesting thing in that whole situation was y'all had your little social media back and forth, and then you actually rolled up and showed up at her comedy show.
Yes, me, and it was like me and 30 people wanted to roll up. Other comedians that were there in solidarity with me, but J. Anthony Brown, whose club it was, got wind of it and shut us down and was like, we don't have no more tables, we're sold out, and you can't bring all your friends up here. I'm like, but we're comics, we can come to any comedy club that we want to at any time we want to. No, don't come up here starting no mess. I wasn't going to come up there starting any mess. I'm a grown woman. I don't fight women in the streets like the housewives do, but I will show up and make my presence known to see what it is actually you're doing. And that particular night, some of the comics in my circle showed their solidarity, some for her, some for me. The ones that showed their solidarity for her, I just write them off as being ass kissers and fame whores and trying to snap pictures with her and all that. And her whole act that particular night was just talking about the housewives and me, which if that was the routine, if she had worked it, might could have been okay, but it wasn't. And I just sat there and I just took it and I just looked at her and, she said some real, foul shit, and I can take that, so I just looked at her and left. My girlfriends wanted to throw a chair at her ass. But it was like gay pride up in there at that particular night, which I ain't got no problem with that either. But they were all her fans, and, we didn't want to start no melee. They were charging $50 to take a picture with her. She was charging that or whatever. And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I just don't see why I had to be in a comedy club. But, J. Anthony welcomed her in. He could do what he wanted to at his club. They had a good time, I guess, and I guess they spent their $50 the way they wanted to.
Well, while she was performing, I guess she was trying to bag on you at the time.
Yeah.
And she was calling you, Cisco's grandmother?
Yeah.
Now, how was her actual routine? Because, why isn't there's no video or anything else like that floating around, is there?
Well, that's one. There's no evidence of it. Usually people in this social media world are always taking video, so I don't know why anybody didn't video it. But, there was a little that got out. But, if that Cisco line had been funny, it wasn't funny. Cisco is dated. He just showed back up on the Soul Train Awards. That wasn't even relevant comment. It was old comment. It was stale. And she could have came with something harder than that if, in fact, she were a comedian. But to just go and talk about somebody in their house, I found it to be, tired and insulting. And TMZ was not there because they caught wind that NeNe was going to be there. They were there because my publicist called them and told them that I would be there. And so that's why they were there. And they asked me what I thought at the end of the show, and they asked her what she thought.